can graph two variables, equations, and inequalities. So you want to put that down on your ICANN, same as for here, what's going to be on the test. So from the poster, number one, in that you can graph the equations and, so that you can graph equations and inequality, okay? When I think of graphing our equations and our inequalities, there are going to be 4 questions. It's going to be a total of 16 points. What type of graphs and inequalities are we looking at? You will definitely have an inequality. So there'll be one inequality. So when we look at the 13 and you're graphing the inequalities, the greater than, the less than shading. You will also have a piecewise function. Okay, so when we think of those piecewise functions, it could be a step one. It could be where I'm telling you, kind of like on that tax table, it could be where x goes from here to here and how do you change that. So looking at those different domains, so you'll have a piecewise function. You will have definitely a linear function where it might be in point-slope form, it might be in standard form, it might be in slope-intercept form. So where you're graphing just the linear equation, understanding the slope and y-intercept or looking at that, and then you will be asked to graph an absolute value. So when I think about that standard, those are kind of my 4 questions that I'm looking at, okay? Again, when you're doing that absolute value function, making sure you understand the number outside and inside, how that looks. Number 2 on the poster. Ev, you want to read first? So I can create this time equations. So I'm creating equations, the model linear. There are 4 questions. Again, 16 points. So test is Tuesday. I gave you, and I sent an email to you and your parents about all the things you could have studied this week. I went to Quizlet, the online quizzes on Pearson, going back over and reading through your notes and studying those. There is a total of 14 questions and a total of 60 points. So when we are creating an equation, one of the ones you might be creating is if I give you 2 ordered pairs. So if I give you 2 points, I give you an xy and an xy and said write an equation, okay? Easiest form for that should be point slope. I will give you a graph and ask you to write an equation. Again, I'll probably show you 2 points on the graph so you can look at that. I will have a story problem. Story problems are almost always best to do in standard form. They kind of seem to be best that way. And then I'm going to give you an XY table. Okay? So I'll give you a table and I'll say, okay, here's X, here's Y, write an equation. Okay? So those are going to be the 4 different types of create equation that's a linear model. If we continue looking at the poster and you are reading the next one, Ben, would you read what it says?
I can write arithmetic sequences inclusively and explicitly.
So I'm going to do the arithmetic sequence, and I'm going to do both recursive and explicit. There are 2 questions. One's worth 8 points. The other's worth 4 points. So for a total of 12 points on that standard. So I might give you a sequence, like it was in the review, and say, write an explicit, write a recursive. I might give you a recursive and say, write an explicit formula for this. Or I might give you an explicit and say, write a recursive formula for this. Okay? So making sure that you can do it from a sequence and get both of them, and then that you can look at one and change it to the other form. And then if I'm looking at the last one, Jacob, you want to read first? So I can interpret and compare. So when we are doing the interpreting, this is where I often will have students kind of struggling because they don't know, like, to compare and contrast something. Okay, so I'm looking at my functions. So what do I mean by that? There are going to be 4 questions, and each one is worth 4 points, so 16 points total. I might give you 2 absolute value functions. So so something like y equals absolute value and y equals a different absolute value. And I might say compare them. Like, tell me something about their slopes. Tell me something about their vertex. Tell me, does it go up or does it go down, right? So one of them might be positive, one might be negative. One might have a slope of 1 out in front, one might have a 3 or a -3. And I'm going to ask you to tell me as many things as you can about that, okay? So that does not mean you just want to stop at the vertex. You want to tell me all the things. It's a 4-point question, right? You tell me one thing, I'm probably looking for a few more. I might be looking at a table. Like, I'll give you a table, and like in the review, I'll give you a graph. So a table and a graph, and I'm going to ask you to compare them. I might say, what do you notice about? And you'd say, oh, they have different slopes, or they have same slopes, or they have different and same y-intercepts, something along that line, okay? So how the one line would be going up to the right, one would be going down because you looked at their slopes. There was one in the homework where it talked about how do you know if 2 lines, are these 2 lines going to be, will they intersect? That's a good interpretation question, right? If 2 lines intersect, what happens? What had to be different in them if they're going to intersect? Did anyone find that when they were doing it in the review? Different slopes, right? So if 2 lines intersect, they must have different slopes. So if I give you 2 equations and I say, well, these 2 lines intersect, you're really looking, are their slopes different? And if the slopes are different, they're probably going to intersect, right? So this is pretty much what the test is. Tomorrow when you come in, we will begin it right at the beginning. You'll hand in your workbook so that I can check your 12 and 13 that you did in there. I want to look at, just looking at your review, so if you would turn to 12, we're going to look at 12 and 13. We are not handing it in today, but I want to answer questions. I had people in this morning working both at 8 and during advisory. I will be in here tonight after school till about 4, and I'll be here tomorrow morning if you want to come in. So, looking at that first page, any questions? The answer to number 1, I probably would have looked at this answer. I know they don't have this in the back, but I would have probably had y - 0 because I used this point, right, the second point. Equals my slope, which was a -4/5, and I would have put x - 9. To me, that was the easiest equation. I know they wrote the answer in slope-intercept form in the back. If I would have used the other point, this point of 4, 4, I would have written the equation to be y - 4. Or y equals, because a lot of ours we have it being equal. So depending on how you're doing point slope, y equals. You still would have had this -4/5, x - 4 + 4. This one is almost in slope-intercept form. You just had to distribute it. On the test, that will not say when you write those equations, it must be in one form or the other. Okay? But the key thing is to make sure you understand how to write it. I had someone in this morning, we were looking at the points, and they said, well, how can I check to make sure if I did it right? If you plug in any point on that line, it has to make your equation true, right? So whatever equation you wrote, you can plug in a number and check it. So anyone have any other questions on the first page? Okay, let's look at that second page. 8 through 12. Okay, as you look at 8 to 12, this is one of those interpret questions, right? This is where you had to tell me the slope of each one, which the slope of the first one is a negative slope. My m is negative here. And someone said, how do you find the slope in this next one? Keeping in mind that these are ordered pairs. So you have the point -1, 1, right? That's one of your ordered pairs. You have 0, 2. You have 1 to 3. To me, there's two easy ways to find the slope. The slope is always equal to, in a table, the change in y over the change in x. So if we were looking at this, I noticed that my x's are going up by 1. That's a change of positive 1. And how are my y's changing? They're going up by 1 also, right? So my slope in the table was 1. I could tell the slope up here was a negative number. I think it came out to be negative 2/3, right? Okay. How do you find in a table the y-intercept? Someone was struggling with that this morning. X is 0. So both of those were 2, right? And if you're struggling with that, you got to make sure. Any other questions on this page? Answers were in the back as you guys were checking. Top of the next page. Questions at all? So it says using to predict if the two would intersect in 13. When we are looking at that one, what we were really looking for is do they have the same slopes, right? This one has a slope of 1. What's our slope here? Should be 5, right? Is this changing by 1? We're going up and adding 5. So are they going to intersect? Definitely. Okay. A lot of you are getting mixed up on your slopes for the horizontal and vertical lines. So make sure you're getting those down. Okay. Any other questions on this page? So here they were just asking about slope, right? They didn't ask you to write an equation. Just find the slope. Okay. Let's take a look at that next page of 12. I have a lot of people struggling with x and y intercept. X and y intercept, again, I'd recommend going back over your notes. X intercept just means find the x value when y is 0. This is your x intercept, right? And when I go to find the y-intercept, you guys just already told me the y-intercept is when x is 0. It's the y value. So you're just trying to find out what is this y in this equation when you replace x with 0. Someone said, I know, but we did that c divided by b and c divided by a, and don't worry about that. You don't have to worry about remembering that. Just think x-intercept is on the x-axis, and on the x-axis, every y point is 0. And when I look at the y-axis, the y-intercept, it must be on this one, and every x value is 0. Okay? Looking at any other ones on this page that you'd like me to take a look at. Questions? It just didn't make sense, or something you want me to take a look at or talk about? All right. Then, please go to your graphs on 13. And I want to specifically, if you have not done number 1, I want you to take this equation and I need you to write it in slope-intercept form. So it was 3x minus y is greater or equal to 6. And I need you to do the same thing with number 3. I need both of these written in y equals mx plus b. They're going to have an inequality, but do that right now. I want to get it sloping. I want it to look like this. I want 1y equals, because right now I have 3x minus y greater or equal to 6. How are you going to get it slope-intercept? No. I have an equation. What do I want to do with the equation? No clue. Not a good sign. Can you help them out, Caleb? I want what by itself? Y, right? Jacob. Subtract 3x from both sides. Now when I subtract 3x, I had a lot of people write down 6 minus 3x. Keep it in the right form, right? Why not keep it with negative y, be really careful that you don't drop that, is greater or equal to negative 3x plus 6. So right now it's like, oh, I should be going up to a positive 6, right? They don't even have that on my graph. Why did they do that? The reason we have it set up this way is because this is not in slope-intercept form. Gavin, I need to do what? Divide or multiply by negative 1, right? It doesn't matter which one. When you do that, when you multiply or divide everything by negative 1, it becomes positive y. I get a positive 3x, and I get a negative 6. And that's why the y-intercept is down here, at negative 6. And the slope is a positive 3. But I didn't put down the inequality because this is the mistake that some of you will also make. You'll keep it exactly the same. You'll keep it greater or equal. So if you graph it, and you're on the test, you got one inequality, you got one shot to get your inequality right. You want to start at the right y-intercept. We're going up 3 and over 1. So we are going in, if we notice this, we're going up 3 and over 1. And we're graphing this. And right now at this point, we're thinking, you know what, I think this should be a solid line, and I agree. And you're trying to decide where to shade. Okay? And you think, if you wrote it this way, it should be greater or equal, you think you should be shading. Go back to the original equation. Okay? This actually should have been switched to a less or equal anytime you multiply or divide by a negative. But you still have this equation written and you're thinking, I don't know how to graph it. I'm not sure where I should shade. You can pick a checkpoint. The easiest checkpoint to pick is the origin 0, 0. Now, do you think if we read this as y is less than, that 0, 0 should be part of our solution? If I think less, do you think 0 is less than this line? No, 0, 0 does not. We think we should be shading here, but you picked 0 to check it, right? This point 0, 0. You go back to the original equation. 0 minus 0, is it greater or equal to 6? Is 0 greater or equal to 6? No, we don't want to shade where this is, right? We want to shade on the other side. So if you would have left this as a greater or equal at this point, you would have gone back and went, oh man, I got to make sure I switch that because it doesn't make sense. It has to be shaded below. Below is less or equal. Okay? If you rewrite this equation in slope-intercept form, then start me out. Number 3.
So you would subtract, add 4x.
So I have 5y is less than, and I'm now going to have 4x minus 3. Taylor, next step. Divide everything by 5. And you get some weird numbers. Abby, Lynn, what do you end up with? We're going to go 4/5 x, right? Does that make sense? We're going to keep that. And then this negative 3/5, how might I write that if I'm going to graph it? Would you keep it as a fraction or would you go decimal? It's negative what? 0.6, right? I had someone go, oh, do you mean I go down 3 and over 5? No, this isn't an ordered pair. This is the y-intercept. This is telling me 0, negative 3/5, 0, negative 6. That is just almost to 1, right? So when you check those answers in the back, it's how you couldn't figure out, well, why they had this. They rewrote them. You had to go through those steps. So if I was looking at this graph, I am now going to go up 4. So I go to the middle, 1, 2, 3, 4, and over 5. Okay, because it was a positive 4/5 slope. And I'm going to go down 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm going to go back 5. And this one, because it is a less, I know I'm going to have a dashed line. And now I'm trying to decide when I read it, where is less? I think less should be shaded below it. And again, I'm not sure, but if I would pick a nice point, like over here, I picked this point. This is located at 5, 0. And if I plug in 5, 0, I get negative 20 plus 0 is less than negative 3. That is definitely a true statement. Negative 20, and I always want to check it in the original one, so I shade below. Someone asked, how do I remember what these ones are? You got to make sure you know the difference between when you have a vertical line and when you have a horizontal line. One of these is vertical, one's horizontal. Again, if you get stuck, think of the equation just y equals 3. If y equals 3, that means every single ordered pair, what value has to be 3? The y has to be 3, and you can make up any of them, right? So if you get stuck, think of just putting in a bunch of 3's for y. Same thing with this one. If x equals negative 4 and you're graphing that and you can't remember vertical or horizontal, just put negative 4 for every x value and plug in different y's. Plug in 0, 1, negative 2. And when you graph that point, negative 1, 0, negative 4, or negative 4, 0, negative 4, 1, you should see that you have a vertical line. Okay? I specifically want to look at 8 and 9 because 9 on the test 8 and 9, the story problems. 6 and 8, thank you. 6 and 8. So 6. Standard form for both of them, right? Please, if you haven't written them in standard form, try and do it right now. So your friends, you and your friends have $30. Can you spend $33? Can you spend 25? Yeah. Okay, I'm ready in standard form, right? How much does the pizza cost? So 9. What variable did they tell you to use? D. Okay. 1D. Yeah, but we can spend 30, but you just said we can spend 25. So we're going to go less or equal to 30. This is my pizzas, right? This is my drinks. Label your graph. This one's pretty easy. Can I have negative amount of pizzas? Can I go in and buy negative pizzas? No. So I also want to say that pizzas have to be greater or equal to 0, right? What about my drinks? Can I buy negative drinks? No. So drinks have to be greater or equal to 0 also. So when I'm looking at this, it's pretty easy if I find my intercepts, right? If I have 0 pizzas, how many drinks can you buy? 30. So I have this point right here at 0, 30, right? If I get no drinks, how many pizzas can I have? 3 1/3, right? Now we can't actually get 3 1/3, but when we graph this, we want to have our point being right here. And now we are going to make, and we are going to shade below there. Now, this actually would be discrete, right? Because you can't buy half a glass, you can't buy half a drink, and you can't buy half a pizza. But to put all those little points in there, right, that would be kind of a pain in the butt, right? So we're doing that. Like I can only have it for the pizzas, but I can have it for all these drinks, so I'd have many dots on this line and many dots on this line. Does that make sense? Okay, but it would be discrete, okay? Whereas when we look at this next one, Whitney, did you get the equation to start off?
Some of it, 3x.
Okay.
Plus 2y.
Yep.
Is.
And this is dealing with our profits, what we're selling. Because we're selling our bracelets and earrings, right? Yeah. Earrings are down here, right? They both sides are up. Y is our bracelets. How much are you trying to make? How much money? Thank you, Owen. We're trying to make greater or equal to $500. What does it tell us? We have already sold. Bracelets. So if we have already sold 50 bracelets today. Okay, no. I need an inequality for my bracelets. My bracelets were which variable? Y. Or is it X? Do I have a mixture on? Okay. So Y has to be greater than 50. Right? Greater or equal to 50. Does that make sense? You've already sold 50. So you can't sell less than 50, right? You've already sold 50, right? Okay. What's the most bracelets we can sell?
400.
400. So Y has to be less than 400. What's the most earrings that we can sell?
400.
So that X is going to go from 0 to 400, right? We could sell 0, we could sell up to 400. Okay? That was how many? She only bought this many. That's all she has to sell.
Yeah, she already sold 50, so she... She hasn't sold those.
Oh, so should this be... But you still have 400 originally to buy. So way out here, all I'm saying is that it can't be, right? It's not going to go on forever. Does that make sense? You can't have unlimited sales. You can't sell 800 earrings and 900 bracelets because you only had 400 to sell. Does that make sense? You're not subtracting the 50 from here. Does that make sense? You're not subtracting this 50. It's just that when I look at this, what does my graph look like? Y is greater than 50 means it's going to be shaded above here. Can't be down here, okay? When I look at the 3x plus 2y, again, could you quite easily find in this first equation, could you easily find your x and y intercept? So if I was looking at that equation that I highlighted, if x was 0, what would your y be? If x was 0, I'd have 2y is greater or equal to 500. What would I have for y? 250. Okay? So my y should be up at 250, right? Okay. If I'm looking for my x-intercept, that's when y is 0, and I would have had 3x is greater or equal to 500. What would be that point? 166, right? So if I'm looking at that one, I'm looking over here and putting my point right here. That's for this red line, right? This red line is a solid line, and it is going everything greater than that. But it can't be, I can't have more than, can't be less than 50 because I already sold 50 of them. So it can be 50, 51, 52, and all the way up. That's why the graph looks kind of like a trapezoid if you were looking at that. Okay, right? Okay. Any other questions on that page? Those ones I wanted to make sure. Number 7, that one came up. Look at the scales on these. These scales are 2, so you got to be really careful when you're writing your slope. I had someone say, oh, this is up 3.5. No, they're telling you this is ordered pair 0.5. They're telling you that the scale is going by 2, so just be really careful, okay? Any other questions through? So these are the practicing graphing of the linear ones, 9 through 12, or 9 through 14. Yeah.
Number 14.
14. When I look at 14, what is your start point? What is the point they gave us? Okay, so I want you to go back. What does point slope look like? Y equals m times x minus x1 plus y1. This is where many of you made that same mistake on the last quiz. It is not 5-2, right? It's negative 5 because this is a plus. And in our equation, it's a minus. So that meant we had to have a negative 5-2. So it was really easy on the last quiz, and it will be again on this one. This is an ugly equation in slope-intercept. You do not want to rewrite it in slope-intercept. You want to go to the point negative 5-2 and put a point there, because that was your given point here. And then you're going to go down 7 and over 2. Or over 4, my fault, over 4. Down 7 and over 4. But it's super ugly if you would have rewritten it in slope-intercept form. So that's why when we first did these assignments, and I would for some of you go back to some of those worksheets that we did, when we did these the first time, I asked you, write the point, tell me the slope right next to it. Write the slope, write the point, so that when you are looking at those. So these are all your linear graph ones. This is your absolute value, and then you had a piecewise function here that you were looking at. Key thing, the weight is less than, which means it's always going to be an open circle, right? At 1, at 2, at 3. So like when I go here, whatever 1 was, it was at 48. At 1, it should be open to here being a closed, right? It's open at the 1. Because for 1 ounce, I'm still paying 48, right? Less than 1 ounce. Once it's 1 ounce, I have to pay 70 cents. Do you agree? Okay, so when you're all looking at that. So it goes from a closed to an open, right? Each one of these, closed to then open. Okay? Any other questions? So, for the remaining time, we have a couple of options. We can do a Quizlet live, which is with our equations, or you can work on your homework. It doesn't matter to me.
Homework.
I will answer questions if you have them. And tonight, I would study. I would study a lot. If you are able to come in tonight after school to ask some questions, and if you haven't corrected your work as you're doing it, I would do that too. Someone asked, are you looking at doing a retake? They don't do retakes at the high school at all. So possibly, but prepare ahead of time. Go to those Quizlets. Go through your notes and study your notes. And make sure that when you read the notes, and if you didn't get the notes on standard form, go back and play the video. It's on the daily planner. You can go back in time 3 weeks. Click on that. And oh yeah, standard form means numbers by itself. Okay? So use your time. I'll help you if you have questions.
It's like asking really annoying questions to my teachers, but looking at this.
So you were just doing explicit answers. I'll mark that down.
He would get his head on shape. Well, actually not, because if we're not running on the streets, so you guys can have friends. So it'll be the same amount as every year. I'm not doing homework. Can you say it? Look at that. Look at this. Look at that. That's cool. I got killed with it. I don't study.
It's not.
I forgot it. It would make up for I'll text her. Well, I won't go right on. Yeah. And you know what I think we should do? After we get all our homework done, right? We should go back. And then, when we get all the new numbers got their problems for each other to do, make our own tag. I'm already done with my homework. That's what I want. I don't know how to code it, but sometimes I have to study. It's great. And that's it. That is a win. I highlighted this because I have no study. I have all of these questions highlighted. Like you. I highlighted what I have to study. Don't come down. I still have these for tonight.
Oh, wow.
Anybody back there? You guys have a manual on English? Have like sharp
We still have the 24.
Oh, whoa. Like a pencil sharpener. Like a handheld one. I don't want one.
Let's use the electric one.